The suspended Labour rebels could be permanently kicked out. I'm going to read into this more from this exclusive from iNews, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an exclusive from iNews with the headline that suspended Labour rebels could be permanently kicked out. The group of MPs have rebelled against the Labour whip twice since the general election. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share it across social media so others are notified of this video. So for those, just for a remnants to remind you, I'm going to go all the way down to here. These are the suspended MPs, the first five here. John McDonnell, Richard Burgon, Ian Bry, Apsana Begum and Zarah Sultana there. These are the 5 MPs who could be facing permanent expulsion from the Labour Party after opposing the government in the votes on the 2-child benefit cap and the winter fuel payments there. And we'll come back to that in a bit. Now, why those ones am I highlighting in particular? Because those ones in particular, not only obviously as it just says there, like I said, the winter fuel allowance, obviously they voted against it as well. Now, if they had abstained in that vote instead of saying for, or instead of they voting for it or voting against it, perhaps their chances of being permanently kicked out probably would have been different. But the chances of them getting back in are very unlikely. Now, we know, and especially if you've been paying attention, you know there was, since Keir Starmer came to power in Labour back in 2020, since then, before, as he rose to power, as he became the Labour leader, and obviously he's now Prime Minister, you would know there has been a sort of purging of a certain selected group of Labour members, Labour folk within the party of itself, a certain left wing of sorts. There is a sort of left wings, but not as much as it used to be. A lot of the MPs who were considered on that side of the spectrum, many of them have been either pushed aside or they don't have the voice they used to, and many of them just could not stand for re-election, which was incredibly bad, in my opinion. Many of them were very, very good champions for their areas as well, but instead, a lot of them were a lot of MPs who replaced them were shoehorns or of certain businesses types, were not people within the interest of their constituents, or not, or more within in line with what Keir Starmer and his people had, shall we say. And you fast forward now, and you see the likes of John McDonnell, for example, who was the deputy shadow deputy leader under Jeremy Corbyn, and you see just how far things have changed since then. You say the only big MP, Labour MP, really that sticks out as somebody who is on the left within the party right now is Diane Abbott, and even her now recently, obviously making carefully contrived comments in recent interviews, as well as a book coming out, saying things about Keir Starmer and Labour weren't exactly there for her over the Frank Hester comments when that came about. For those who don't know, Frank Hester made very racist comments about Diane Abbott and black people. And Keir Starmer didn't really give much of a care for her, even though he showed it but didn't show it. Didn't look very good for him. So all these things kind of paint quite a picture about the kind of party that Keir Starmer has got. A very certainly not the Conservatives, but I definitely feel like it's one where he has a lot of people who don't really have much wiggle room to kind of have a bit more say on how Labour should approach things. It's more about what the top brass, the inner circle, really get to say. Definitely is what it feels like. And in particular, not just John McDonnell, but some of those in there. I think the fact that they voted against the winter fuel payments may obviously, and I agree with the eyes exclusive here, that we will lead to them probably getting the push, never getting the whip restored at all, which will obviously mean that when the by-elections come around, obviously it'll be a challenge for them because they won't be under Labour's banner, so it'll be a challenge for them. But the good news is that for them in the general election, we have seen that sometimes it's not always about the colour of your rosette, and sometimes it's just about the person themselves. I.e. Jeremy Corbyn has been an example of that. So we'll have to wait and see when the by-elections come round how they will do. But it was supposed to be up to 6 months that they were going to be facing originally. The MPs who voted against the King's when they voted against the 2-child benefit cap within the King's speech, and obviously since then they've kind of been sitting on the sidelines. They were given sort of like assurances sort of thing from Jeremy Corbyn. We know they've been talking to Jeremy Corbyn, the independent candidate, and some of the independents there, but I wasn't expecting them to get too cohesive with them while being on the outside, because they wanted to get back into the Labour Party. But I think given that they voted against the winter fuel payments, they're kind of just, this is why I kind of inclined to agree with the eyes exclusive here, that I do think that they're just not going to get back in. But maybe I'm wrong, because nobody expected Diane Abbott to get back in, and somehow she did. So let's read what they've had to say, you guys. So the former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell is among 5 suspended Labour MPs who face being permanently kicked out of the Labour Party, according to sources. The groups have rebelled twice against Sir Keir Starmer during his short tenure. The first rebellion saw 7 MPs defy the party's whip in July to vote in favour of an SNP motion calling for the government to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. Now, one of the arguments, and I did make a sort of argument, I didn't defend the government's decision to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. In fact, I think I'm someone who strongly believes that we should get rid of the 2-child benefit cap. I would say also to wait to see what they do with regards to it in the budget. Now, if they mention nothing about the 2-child benefit cap within the budget, then obviously I will without a doubt be throwing Labour under an effing bus here for it, because we're talking about child poverty. But their argument the argument for not doing it was like physical means and managing money and all that kind of stuff, because they just come into government. That was their argument. Don't have to agree with it. Don't have to disagree with it. That was their argument. And it was an SNP motion as well. So 5 of the MPs then rebelled again last week in a table voted by the Conservatives, in which opposed the government's plans to make the pensions winter fuel payments means tested. And they included Mr McDonnell, as well as Apsana Begum, Richard Burgon, Ian Brady and Zarah Sultana. Yeah, these were all the ones who originally got kicked. Mr McDonnell has said that the winter fuel cuts fly against everything I believe in as a Labour MP about tackling inequality and poverty within our society, while Ms Begum and Ms Sultana said they were opposing Labour's austerity. And the Chief Whip Sir Alan Campbell is expected to make a decision sooner rather than later over how to discipline the MPs, the government source said, although it may hold off announcing its decision until Parliament returns from its conference recess in October. Yeah, so we probably won't get an answer anytime soon. So it was originally going to be out for 6 months, but it looks like they made that decision a lot sooner because of comments that they made, and the fact that they voted against the government and this one as well on the winter fuel payment. Despite being suspended from the Labour Party over their rebellion to the King's Speech debate, the MPs who are currently listed as independents were still expected to vote along with the government in lines as part of a probation that could see them reinstated to the party. Yeah, this is what I thought. The Chief Whip could decide to keep the MPs on a rolling suspension rather than expel them entirely, amid concerns that the left-wing group could align themselves with Jeremy Corbyn's alliance of pro-Gaza independents. I don't think that's going to bother the Labour government in any way, shape or form, if I'm honest. So Alan is also mulling on how to deal with Labour MP John Trickett. Although he didn't rebel in July, Mr Trickett became the only Labour MP to vote with the opposition to block the cuts to the winter fuel allowance last week. I don't know if John Trickett has not lost the whip as the time of this recording. I'm surprised he hasn't. I'm generally surprised he hasn't. It's been quite a while now since it. So they haven't made a decision on it yet. But he has been the only MP. The rest all abstained because they were afraid of losing the whip. In a statement following the vote, he said he could not in his good conscience vote to make my constituencies poor, and will sleep well tonight knowing that I voted to defend my constituents. If the party whips deal with him in the same way July rebels were treated, he faces being suspended from the party in up to 6 months. However, he is unlikely to face such a harsh punishment as he did not revoke on the King's Speech debate, which is seen as a confidence matter in the government. 53 Labour MPs abstained or were absent from the vote, the majority of whom were likely to have been slipped, meaning that they had permission from the party not to participate, though around a dozen of the absentees were reportedly unauthorised. Those who missed the vote have reportedly been stripped of their potential privileges and warned about their future conduct in a letter sent by the whips, according to The Guardian. But they were trying to save face and trying to cover themselves there. See, this is the problem, right? This is the problem with the system when you are part of a government and they are forced to do something which is really sorry, let me rephrase this. When you are part of a political party of a government that is choosing to make people poorer, and you know in your good conscience that if you vote with it, it's going to be on your resume to say that you voted to make people poorer or make people worse off, or in this case, obviously, cut off the heating for pensioners who need it. That's going to sting. And especially when you go back to your constituents, go back to next time you do your runarounds for your constituents, people will say, well, you voted for it, didn't you? Didn't you vote to cut away the pensions, cut away from my nan or cut away from me and whatnot? It will sting. And it will hurt the vote. It will hurt people in certain constituencies. You know, people remember things. Now, people didn't. Partygate was something that was mentioned at the general election. And remember, that was 4 years ago, 3 years ago, guys. You know, people haven't forgotten that. Some people do have more than a short-term memory, and you know, it is about sometimes for some of these MPs. While of course they want to stand by and support Labour and support the government, they also need to make it clear, look, I can't have this on my resume, on my histories, knowing that I voted for something that I think was wrong, because of the consequences. You have to be willing to make these difficult, ridiculous compromises in order to move up the ladder. So basically, you have to have these on your conscience in a way. But I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair, and I generally think some Labour MPs generally do care about their constituents, care about their jobs, and I do think that not just Labour, but many politicians do. Yes, of course, there's always politicians that don't give a damn about us. Yes, you don't need to tell me that in the comments, guys. But there are some that do care. There are some that do. But yeah, some of them I do feel for. Some I have none. Like West Street. The winter fuel allowance is an annual tax-free payment worth between £200 and £300, which is designed to help pensioners cover their heating bills. In July, Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced that the payment would be scrapped for all pensioners except those in receipt of for pension credit or other means-tested benefits such as universal credit and basic income job seeker allowance. Now, I want to be very, very clear here. Not all pensioners are entitled to pension credit. Some of them may not be able. Some of them have to jump through a lot of hoops to get, so for example, universal credit. Some of them may not be qualified for these payments. So, as a result of this decision, some of them may die, or will die, shall we say. Sparked a backlash from MPs, both Labour and Conservative, and voters, but the Chancellor is standing behind the change, and Sir Keir survived the backlash rebellion last week after the Conservatives put forward an opposition motion to block the government's plans. While a majority of 220 MPs voted against the motion, so backing Labour's politics, 228 voted in favour of it, including Mr Trickett, who stressed that the consequences of pensioners' poverty are devastating and could be a matter of life and death in his constituents. The government's whip's office has been contacted for comment. I'll just share down here at the end as well. The other two MPs who are temporarily suspended from the Labour Party for voting against the government on the 2-child benefit cap. But they did not. They voted with the winter fuel payments. So there's a good chance that these two could be allowed back in. So Imran Hassan and Rebecca Long-Bailey here. Yeah, so they both abstained on the winter fuel payments. So they didn't vote against it, but they've abstained from it on the matter there. So that's an interesting one there to see how would Imran Hassan and Rebecca Long-Bailey be treated indifferently as a result of abstaining as opposed to voting with the government. That's an interesting one. It is going, yeah. So once obviously the, things would come back in October, it will be interesting to see what the Labour Whip does decide to do in the end. But ultimately, the ball is in Prime Minister Keir Starmer's court on what he wants to do. And he can, and the sad reality is he can afford to let all these people go and be ruthless if he really wanted to, and just take the whip away, keep the whip away from all of them if he really wanted to. I've said this before and I've said this again. They did not need to do this. They did not need to do this winter fuel payment cut, especially at the time, at a time when people are already struggling. There are some positive things that Labour have done. However, the negatives are being highlighted a lot more than the positives, such as obviously the increase in some pay rises for many public sectors that are desperately in need of it as well. But a lot of things hinge on this budget, on whether or not we are getting a Labour austerity coming or something else. But what do you guys think? What do you guys make of the suspended Labour rebels that could be permanently kicked out? What do you make of their decision? So some of them for voting against the winter fuel allowance, and some of them voted to abstain. What do you guys think about it? Do you think some will get back in? Do you think the 5 who didn't are going to be stayed out forever? Let me know your thoughts and more down in the comment section below. Found this video interesting, please hit the like button, we greatly appreciate it. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video, and subscribe because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me and the work that I do here, you could do so by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.